Good afternoon. My name is Amanda Rivera. I'm the hearing examiner presiding over today's case. The date is July 12th, 2024, and this is case, DCI 2022-00046. It is a rezoning to RPD in the Lehigh Acres Planning Community. Because this is a quasi-judicial hearing, all evidence and testimony must be taken under oath. So if you intend to speak, if you could please raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll provide is the truth?
I do.
Thank you. I would first ask staff, yes.
Madam Hearing Examiner, I have the notice of public hearing that was advertised.
Yes. Thank you. And I will accept that as Staff Exhibit 2. Staff Exhibit 1 was pre-labeled as the staff report. Thank you. So the way that we're going to proceed this afternoon is that first we're going to hear from the applicant. They're going to present their request in the case and call any witnesses that they may have. Following that, we will hear from the county staff who will present their review and recommendation in this case. They are recommending approval with conditions and deviations. After that, I will call forward the cards that I have here in the order that I have them. That's your opportunity to come to the podium and place any comments that you may have into the record. I would note there is only one opportunity to speak, so I would encourage you to take notes as we go through so that you can make the most of your time at the podium. There is no time limitation today. However, once this goes to the board, there is a time limitation that they will impose, and that you are limited to the comments that you make on the record here today. So please just be mindful of that again as you're making your comments. After we conclude public comment, we'll come back to the applicant and the staff for their rebuttal and any closing comments that they may have in this case. Following today's hearing, I will be making a written recommendation to the board, and then the final hearing on this matter will be before the board. If you speak today and complete a card, you will receive a copy of the notice of when that hearing will be, as well as where at the board chambers. So following that, we are beginning with the applicant whenever you're ready. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name is Terry Kramer for the record. I'm the attorney on behalf of the applicant. Quick introduction, we have Daniel DeLisi as our land use planner, Andrew Fitzgerald for project engineer, Yuri Burkall as our planner, and Barrett from Bear Paws for environmental. We're here today. Currently the property is zoned commercial plan development. We're looking to request a rezone to residential plan development, and it's a 12.9 acre piece off of Joel Boulevard. Dan's going to go ahead and walk through a PowerPoint presentation, and then when he's done, or we can do it prior, introduce it as an exhibit. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. For the record, Dan DeLisi. I am a land use planner representing the applicant today. So I'm going to go through a presentation, and I'll talk about how the proposed rezoning request is in compliance with the standards of review. Included within that is going to be very brief from my point. I'm going to overview the transportation, what the transportation study showed, and what the environmental study showed. Barrett and Yuri are both here. If you need additional clarification or if you have any questions, they're here for questions. And then Drew is going to get up and talk about the deviations, and then Terry and I will talk about the 48-hour memo. Just want to make note that with the 48-hour memo, we did submit the revised master concept plan with the revisions that were requested in the staff report, as well as the schedule of deviations and the revised transportation study. So, the subject property is located on the south, really southeast side of Joel Boulevard. Joel Boulevard goes north-south over to the east of here, and then southwest in this section. So we're here on the southeast side of the road, approximately half a mile northeast of Bell Boulevard, which is an intersection right around here. We're not, as you can notice, not at a major intersection, which kind of plays into what's going on here. This site has historically been developed. Just in looking at old aerials, there was some sort of a commercial, it looks like an office use on the site back in the 90s into the early 2000s. It is no longer here, obviously. The site's been heavily impacted. It really isn't a great commercial site. You do see small commercial uses. I believe there's a gas station in the area as you drive along Joel Boulevard, but nothing really, like a commercial center. It's just not conducive to that with no cross-street traffic. You do see that at Bell Boulevard. I believe that's where the Winn-Dixie is, and just a big shopping center area because you have that traffic distribution that you can have. So this site was zoned for commercial plan development in, I think it was 2006, and it's just sat vacant. From a planning standpoint, vacant sites in urban areas are not a positive for the neighborhood and the surrounding use. They certainly are not maintained as well as residential lawns. You have exotics that pop up. In the case of this site, we had a homeless camp that we had to deal with over the last year. There were certainly some concerns from the neighborhood about that homeless encampment. But that's what you get with vacant sites in urban areas. Redeveloping this site into something that's productive for the community is really the intent of this application. This is what the future land use map looks like for this area of Lehigh Acres. It's all central urban, all around this property. You can see the urban community up in this corner here, but it's all central urban. Central urban has a standard density range of up to 10 units an acre and then bonus density up to 20 units an acre with TDUs. And the way that breaks down is you can get up to 15 units an acre with any mix of transfer of development units or affordable housing on-site or fee in lieu. And then to get from 15 to 20, you would have to buy Pine Island TDU specifically. So that is what our proposal is to allow the flexibility to be able to get up there depending on what we have on hand.
And I think that was a distinction that you made in the 48-hour letter, that you haven't essentially made that determination yet, whether it would be on-site or if you're going to do the fee in lieu.
Exactly, yes. Current zoning around the property, you could see a number of commercially zoned properties, multifamily. As you drive along the corridor, of course, you can really see it in real time. There is a mix of some smaller multifamily units and then scattered small-scale commercial development. The property itself is zoned. I'll show you the previous CPD. This piece was zoned RS1, so we're zoning from CPD and RS1 to RPD, Residential Plan Development. So this is the current master concept plan for the CPD portion. Buildings along Joel Boulevard, big parking area here. Pretty straightforward. It's on 164,000 square feet of commercial on 9.24 acres. So at the time, there were plans for a fairly significant commercial center, which after 20 years just never was able to happen. The proposed rezoning is a little more acreage, 12.9 acres, 258 multifamily units. We're at 20 units an acre. And as I said before, the intent is to get a use that is viable for the site and a multifamily use. The intent is also to try and create something that fits within the community. So I'll talk about this in a little bit with, how Lehigh is developing and redeveloping over time. You just have a lot of platted single-family lots, and part of the Lehigh Community Plan talks about incentivizing commercial and alternative forms of housing to just those single-family lots. And I've been working in Lee County for now it's almost 24 years, and this has always been the struggle with Lehigh Acres. How do you find sites for getting a diversity of housing and commercial? But in doing that with either use, you need to figure out how you become compatible with the single family that surrounds it. In this case, we're adjacent to some rights of way here and here. Where the single family abuts us, we're proposing a significantly enhanced buffer. It's essentially the buffer a little bit more enhanced even over what you'd have to provide for commercial adjacent to residential. So we have an enhanced buffer when we're adjacent to residential. We're not proposing any access through the residential neighborhood, so I apologize that this is named Kingston Street RPD. There is no access to Kingston Street. Maybe it should have been named Joel Boulevard RPD instead. But we've also tried to locate the lakes to the extent possible adjacent to the single-family uses or on the perimeters. So here and here, the sides of the buildings, so you don't have a use looking over a residential use. So the sides of the buildings would be adjacent to the residential areas, and trying to have significant setbacks, but also that enhanced buffer adjacent to residential uses. So we do have the lakes on the perimeter, and then the preserve areas also along the perimeter.
So just to orient, the prior CPD, that essentially aligns with, as if this were cornered off, and then the curved portion is what you're adding that was RS1 previously?
Exactly.
And that's essentially where the enhanced buffer with the wall is going to run?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah. So we've tried as much as possible to internalize the impacts, if you will, and have things like lakes on the perimeters so that it adds value to the surrounding neighborhood. The criteria of approval are listed in LDC section 34, excuse me, -145. I'll review these now. The first criteria is consistency with the comprehensive plan. So as I said before, the future land use map shows us in the central urban land use category. That is described in the Lee plan as the urban core of Lee County. You could see quite a bit of Lehigh Acres is in the central urban, a lot's also in the urban community, but this is the more intense land use category. It allows for higher densities of residential and commercial than urban community. There's not a lot of distinction in the commercial, but the distinction in residential is pretty significant. So the future land use map envisions this as an area where they would like to promote higher densities if possible. Objectives 2.1 and 2.2 deal with development, location, and timing. We are in an urban area, as I said before, it's infill, so the timing is right. Urban services exist to the site, and I'll have a map that talks about that in a little bit. We do have a letter of availability from FGUA, the utility service provider in this part of Lehigh Acres. They can provide central water and sewer service. Policy 5.1.2 talks about directing residential development away from areas where there are hazards. Lehigh Acres, one of the beauties of Lehigh Acres is it's high in comparison to the rest of the county. We're not in the coastal high hazard area. We're not in an area where higher densities would be of concern. Policy 5.1.3, this has some criteria for higher density residential. It's not really specified what that means exactly, but it says higher densities should be proximate to employment centers and public services and commercial. there's quite a lot around us. There are a number of schools, Lehigh Middle, Lehigh Acres Middle School. There's fields, there's parks. There's a lot around this site. We are also along a transit line, bus route 515. There are multiple stops all along Joel Boulevard. When you drive along Joel Boulevard, you see them. They're very apparent. Lehigh Regional Medical Center is about 3 miles. It's right around here. So there is a lot going on in the area, and it is an area where higher densities would make sense from a planning standpoint. Now, I was talking about the Lehigh Acres community plan a moment ago. This property is partially in the commercial overlay. Policy 25.6.1 speaks specifically to the commercial overlay. And I've highlighted what's pertinent in this. The commercial overlay, obviously, in Lehigh Acres, and we've heard it before the Lehigh Planning Panel several times, they want to see commercial uses, anywhere that, they can get them. And there's obvious need for that, and that makes a lot of sense. The commercial overlay also specifies that if it's not commercial, housing alternatives to the typical quarter-acre, half-acre subdivision lots are what you want to see. So in this case, we are providing a alternative housing type to what you typically see in Lehigh Acres. It helps diversify the community. It helps diversify who can live there, income levels. Young professionals tend to like apartment living. So we are in compliance with 25.6.1, but just from an overall planning standpoint, providing that diversity of housing type is a positive within Lehigh Acres, where you have such an expanse of single-use, single-family development. I do want to note we did meet with the Lehigh Acres Planning Panel. There is a representative here today from them. I'm sure he'll speak. We did find support before the panel as well, so we met the intent of that policy. Surrounding uses, as I mentioned before, there's just a mix of uses. As you drive along the corridor, you'll see it. Multifamily, there's a villa product, townhouse area, and then around the site to the south, east, and north, you see the RS1 and the single-family development. Across the street, there's a church, there's a gas station, and there's multifamily across the street, just a mix of uses in the area. And as I said before, our goal was to try and create uses adjacent to these areas that would be more compatible, like the lake and the preserve, and orient the buildings and create that enhanced buffer along this area where we're adjacent to single-family use, so that we can ensure compatibility with the surrounding development. And so this is what I was just pointing out: the preserve, the lake, enhanced buffer. The enhanced buffer is 25 feet with a wall. It's the buffer that's utilized when you have parking areas in proximity to residential. In this case, it wouldn't have been a requirement to have that buffer along the entire area here, certainly not where the lake is and not where the buildings are, but we just decided to extend it all the way around to provide that enhancement for the community. As I mentioned before, urban services are in the area. I talked about the bus stops, the schools, parks, recreation, and FGUA letter of availability. We did do an environmental analysis, and again, Barrett is here if you want, if you have any other questions. The area that's being preserved is right here. That's really the only indigenous area on site. There are other wooded areas. Those are greater than 75% exotic. It's heavily infested. And, you know, as I noted before, this is a redevelopment site. It was developed at one point in time. So that's what you would expect for a site that's really been largely unmaintained over the last 20 years. In exotic and heavy exotic infestation. And so the area where we do have indigenous vegetation, that's where we're saving it. TIS was done by TR Transportation, and again, Yuri is here to answer any questions, but the TIS compared the existing approval of the CPD, even though that wasn't the entirety of the property, just what was approved on the CPD, to what's being proposed in the RPD, and there's a very significant reduction in trips, over 5,000 trips as a reduction, daily two-way trips, and then these are peak hours, peak hour trips. So during PM peak hour, you see the biggest reduction. During AM peak hour, you see a big reduction, and then a mix here. But overall, it's a very significant reduction in trips from the CPD to the RPD. And then the conclusion is also important. It's not just a comparison, but how does that impact the roadway network? And the roadway network maintains an adequate level of service post-development, both pre-development and post-development. So this project does not cause a negative and adverse impact to the roadway network. Through this application, because we were asking for bonus density, we also had to review compliance with LDC section 2-146. And there are 4 criteria listed under 2-146. The first is that we will not be required to put additional traffic through areas of significantly lower density. And I'll just go back to the master concept plan for a second and talk about access. Our main access is directly to Joel Boulevard. We have a secondary access to Country Club right here. And that's it. We don't have any access, as I said, to Kingston or the surrounding neighborhood. We're not accessing the property on these residential streets that we're adjacent to. We're limiting the access to the point closest to Joel Boulevard that we could access from a secondary access, and Joel Boulevard for our main access. The clear intent is we don't want to circulate traffic through the residential neighborhood, and that's the way the plan has been designed. The second criteria is whether or not additional density will overwhelm urban services. Again, we have letters of availability or a letter of availability from FGUA. We're in a highly urban area, central urban land use category all around us, development all around us. Level of service is not going to be degraded along the roadways, so we're not overwhelming infrastructure in any way. If we're in the coastal high hazard area, we need to look at shelters and mitigation. We're not in the coastal high hazard area, so that doesn't apply. And then compatibility. Again, we've taken a lot of measures in the site plan to orient the buildings, to put uses along the perimeter that are more compatible and add value to the surrounding neighborhood. And then where we do have the buildings we have and parking areas, we have an enhanced buffer to ensure compatibility. With that, I'll hand it over to Drew Fitzgerald to talk about the deviations.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Drew Fitzgerald. I'm with Respect Company, and I'm going to walk through the 4 deviations that are requested. Just a couple of points of corrections, I should say, is the enhanced buffer.
Sorry, I am going to hand you the PowerPoint presentation
Thank you.
for the record.
I'll take that as applicant exhibit 1. Applicant exhibit A was the 48-hour letter. Thank you. Thank you.
So just a couple of things to point out to correct the record. So the enhanced 25-foot buffers are actually along these edges where butting up to the residential. It doesn't wrap along Kingston. This will be a type D buffer, which is your typical right-of-way buffer. So that was, I think when Dan may have described it as it wrapped around that southern part of the property, it's only where it abuts up to the residential, single-family residential lots. There is a second indigenous area here in the kind of the northeast corner of the development, or I guess that'd be more north. And that affected where we ended up having our secondary access, which is one of the accesses I'll be describing as part of the deviations. So deviation 1 relates to the lake at the southern tip of the property. We've asked to deviate from the 50-foot of separation that's required to adjacent properties to allow for 25 feet so that we can maximize the size of the lake and get the fill for the development from that lake, not having to bring in as much in-haul fill with trucks. The one thing we've done with the wall, though, is we've added that protection to the public so that no one can get access to the lake from the adjacent properties. The second and fourth deviation. So the second deviation is for the main entrance, and that has to do with the, it's from section 10285A. It has to do with the separation from other driveways. So what we've tried to do, because we're anticipating some level of turn lanes that'll be required, is we've tried to center the access, propose it towards the center between Joel Boulevard, or Joel Way and Country Club Parkway. There are 6 non-conforming driveways along the north side of Joel Boulevard, and because it's 4 lanes and there's no median, you have to measure from the driveways across the arterial. So we tried to center it where it's at the entrance to the Lehigh, what's the name of that? Lehigh Resort Club. So we pretty much put our driveway where the main entrance to the Lehigh Resort Club is, and tried to center it between Joel Way and Country Club Parkway.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to look up the LDC. Is that deviation also to allow the access on Joel, since generally?
That's 3.
Okay, that's a separate
Yeah,
deviation.
I'll get to that one.
We were on 285A, so I thought,
They're all 3 from 10285A.
thank you.
So the second one from 10285A is for Country Club Parkway. So this is a residential development. It's greater than 5 acres. It's required to have 2 means of ingress or egress. We've already described the main access here, and then the secondary access would be over here on Country Club Parkway. That is a minor collector, and you've got another road here to the south, and then you've got Joel Boulevard. We've basically centered that access, but we don't meet the 125 feet of spacing required. So we've asked for a deviation for 111 feet from Joel Boulevard instead of the 125 feet. And then the final deviation is deviation number 3, which you alluded to earlier, and that is, so 10285 prohibits lots in urban areas from accessing directly to arterials or major collectors. I question whether this would be considered a lot and not a parcel, but we were recommended to ask for the deviation. And so we've asked for that deviation so we could access Joel Boulevard, which is a principal arterial, and that avoids having any of our access points on any of the local streets that serve the surrounding residential neighborhood. And then that concludes all of our deviations.
I had a stormwater question. Do you want me to ask it while you're up here, or do you want to?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I don't want to mess up your flow if you haven't.
No, that's fine.
No pun intended on that one.
Understood.
I just wanted to ask if I read through the summary that was provided, and I just wasn't clear. It said that it's sheet flowed now, but it seems like there are some pipes that are in place that's collecting it and discharging it off-site somewhere.
Yeah, when I read that again this time, I thought we could have worded it a little bit better, but let me see if I can. There used to be a right-of-way, platted right-of-way through here, and there had been some drainage that had been put in. Those inlets are still in, and there's like some shallow swales on the property. It looks like they are kind of directed towards those inlets. And then they cross through this street here. It's either between these two lots or these two lots. And then it'll continue, and if I can find a further, they continue through the neighborhood. They're connected, there's catch basins on each road as you go through the neighborhood until it gets to Able Canal. So when this is developed, there's already a pipe for an outfall that it can connect to. There's also catch basins up along Joel Boulevard, I think from the previous development that was there, that we would have access to connect to as well.
Okay. But the conveyance system that you're proposing adds essentially a double layer, it sounded like. So you've got the detention areas, and then you're also going to filter again before you actually discharge off-site?
Correct.
Okay. So would there be, for the neighboring communities, is there going to be any noticeable difference to them? It sounds like it's already sheet flowing and collecting. Okay.
Yeah, no, there won't be any impacts to the surrounding neighborhood at all.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just 48-hour memo. Just put that on the record again.
We're done with our presentation if staff wants to go.
Okay.
Good.
Yes, whenever staff's ready then. Thank you. Well, I suppose, hold on one second. I had a TIS question, so now would be a good time for me to ask that, if you could. Thank you. It's two questions, and they're somewhat technical, I suppose, but the TIS talked about it being a low-rise development, and I ask this in a lot of hearings because I don't ever write it down and carry it forward. What's the distinction between the low-rise and the mid-rise?
So for the record, Yuri Baika with TR Transportation. The reason we assume low rise because that's the worst case scenario. So low rise, if you compare the trip generation for low rise, it generates much more trips than mid rise or high rise. Okay. So just to be on the safe side and then look at the worst case scenario, we assume low rise.
Thank you, because this was 45 feet, so I thought that might qualify as mid-rise, but I don't recall what it is and how that affects the actual traffic generation that you're looking at.
And usually we don't get those details when we do our traffic study, so that's what we kind of assume the worst case scenario, just to be on the safe side.
And then when you looked at it for the approved zoning, did that include the RS1 piece?
Yes.
And how many lots? What was the generation of the single families on that?
Let me check. So those 3.7 acres are currently zoned as RS1, which allows, I believe, 5 units per acre.
Okay, so you did include that whenever you were comparing the approved versus the proposed?
Yeah, and it was only 18 dwelling units, but again, the biggest traffic generating was the commercial that's currently approved.
Of course, okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if staff is ready, thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Beth Workman. I'm a principal planner with the zoning section. I have been accepted as an expert in the Lee Plan as well as the Land Development Code, and I wish to do so today as well.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I have a few housekeeping items. The first one is the PowerPoint.
So I can accept that as staff exhibit 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The second thing I have, there was a gentleman here. It was Mr. Mark Hamblin. He was here at the first hearing where we had to continue, and he let me know afterwards that he had a family event happening today, and so he's out of state. So he emailed me a letter that I would like to put into the record because he lives adjacent to where the residential is coming in on that southern side. He lives off of Englewood, and I have, after I get done with my presentation, if you want, I can put up the aerial, which I'm going to do for the public, and I have a dot on where this gentleman lives, just for your record, for your reference.
So that would be staff exhibit 4. Thank you. Has this been provided to the applicant previously?
No, it has not. Okay.
Do you want to address this when you get to that slide?
Yes.
We can see, okay,
Yes.
then let me set this aside.
I'm going to talk about it a little bit within my PowerPoint presentation, but because I can't toggle back and forth the aerial,
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, so the case before you today is DCI 2022-00046. It's called Kingston Street RPD. The request is to rezone 12.9 acres from commercial plan development and residential RS1 to residential plan development. The applicant is proposing 258 multifamily dwelling units, which includes 129 bonus density units, of which are 65 transfer of density from the Greater Pine Island TDRs, as well as a private on-site amenity. The maximum height for the multifamily dwelling units is 45 feet. The amenity area will be the 30 feet. There are 4 deviations being requested in this application. So the applicant went over the history a little bit about the previous development that was on here, as well as the zoning resolution that was approved in 2007. And it should be noted that what you see in that purplish blue is the CPD. The outline of the subject property that's in for rezoning is red. So a portion of this, which would be 9.25 acres of the overall 12.9, was rezoned to commercial plan development. The owner could go forward with a development order on that and do the commercial if the person so choose, but they're in for rezone to add the RS1 area, which is to the south here, to this and rezone to residential plan development. The commercial plan development, as Mr. DeLisi stated, was approved for a commercial park abutting Joel Boulevard for 164,700 square foot commercial floor area. And Mr. DeLisi had the master concept plan where you can see where the cutoff is from that RS1 that's located just to the south here. So this portion would all be parking, abutting the right-of-ways, and then this is all right-of-ways that they're abutting. So what the current applicant wants to do is to do the residential plan development with the multifamily dwelling units. The surrounding areas, as well as the subject parcel, are in the central urban, as Mr. DeLisi pointed out. That future land use category is the urban core. When we say urban core, we mean that the land in the central urban area has the facilities, the capacity to handle intense development, if you will. So it has the public facilities, it has parks, schools, shopping centers to support development at a higher intensity. So looking at the aerial to the south is the residential single family, and then you have it over in this area as well. Sandwiched in between is more of an intense area of commercial, graduating to this multifamily with the golf course as you approach the residential to the north. I want to note that, I think it's this slide, forgive me. There are 2 commercial plan developments to the north that I kind of want to go over a little bit, so just for the intensity purposes. So in 2009, both of these were rezoned, both of these properties. One was for 100,000 square foot commercial use, that in those uses was equipment dealers, as well as convenience food and beverage, and the height, and it's this one right here, the height was 35 feet. As you work down towards the core with that Winn-Dixie intersection and Bell Boulevard, there's another PD that was commercial, and it's 140,000 square feet of commercial uses with a 45-foot high building height on this one. Those both could be built today if they came in for a development order. And also, Mr. DeLisi pointed this out, that the applicant wants to go to multifamily. These are villas over here of multifamily, as well as multifamily over in this section, kind of flanking this Joel Boulevard. So this is the master concept plan. Mr. DeLisi went over the layout, and when staff reviews master concept plans, we're looking mostly for the compatibility to the surrounding land uses. And so there was some thoughtfulness going into the design of this because the intense amount of buildings are located to the north, if you will, along the arterial. Joe Boulevard is an arterial with the minor collector of Country Club Parkway over in this area. So as you work to the south, the intensity becomes less as you work towards the residential subdivision that's located in this region. And as you work south, the buffers increase. So intensity goes down and the buffers increase because we still have parking area here and 2 residential buildings going in along with this lake and the lake towards the south. So Mr. DeLisi went over that a little bit, but I wanted to kind of put that into context to what was previously approved for the commercial was from this point forward this was going to be a big parking lot with the commercial. So development, location, and timing, I kind of went over. This is to me is an infill project because it is redevelopment of this area that was at one time developed with structures on it that have been since removed. With the rezoning application that was in for the commercial plan development sitting for so long, things around it have developed. So these, this was 09 rezonings on these PDs. And so this is truly an infill project. The access along Joel is an arterial, as I mentioned. The Country Club is the minor collector, and potable water and sanitary sewer will be provided. They have capacity with FGUA. Going over some of the public facilities, there is a bus route that runs along Joel with many stops. Adjacent to the subject property, which is right here, there are 3 to 4 stops within vicinity of this subject property. There's also public parks, schools, a greenways strip along Able Canal. There's the public schools in here. EMS is down here. There's another EMS location and police up in this region. So it does fitting that urban core in the future land use category. So transportation, hit on it a little bit. The access is going to be along Joel Boulevard with the secondary access on Country Club. Joel is an arterial, Country Club is a minor collector. By developing this site on this property, the traffic impact will not have a detriment to the surrounding land uses. At time of development order, the assessment of turn lanes and the real-time TIS will come in to look to see if improvements need to be put into place to absorb some of that activity that's new to this area for that infill site. Mr. DeLisi touched on this. I just want to point out this is the map for the Lehigh Acres overlay, the commercial overlay. So you can see a small strip of this subject property is in that commercial overlay, and then across the Joel there's a larger area. And so the way that policy in the Lee plan reads is that yes, we encourage the commercial uses to go in these areas, but if an applicant wants to do residential, to diversify it from a 1/4 acre to 1/2 acre lots to more of a multifamily setting, which is what the applicant's doing. I want to go over the environmental a little bit. When an application comes in, our environmental staff will review it, and we're reviewing 2 definitions in our land development code. So there's a definition of indigenous vegetation in our land development code, and that definition links to a list of plants that make up a habitat. And so that's in 10-701 of our land development code. So once we establish that there are native habitats, we look at the amount of exotic species. Anything 75% exotic or less is considered an indigenous area. So when you see E values on a Florida land use cover and classification map, the E values determine that percentage. Anything with an E4 is not indigenous because that is 75% or greater. The E values go on 25% increments. So anything E3 or less is considered indigenous. And as you can see here, we have a pine flatwood, which is considered an indigenous habitat that has an E2 in these 2 locations. What county staff does is overlay the flux onto the master concept plan to ensure that these areas are being saved. And the applicant is proposing the indigenous in these two areas. During the review process, there was an access point going through this 411E2. They switched it over to the 411E4, which then draws me to the 48-hour letter for the TIS needing to be changed to evaluate. So the flip-flop of that. So that's how the flux works. And then in our land development code, we have a percentage of open space. It's 40% open space. So it's green space throughout, landscaping. Half of that is indigenous, and they are meeting that requirement. This busy slide is a bunch of stars. Those stars are the right-of-way buffers that are required per our land development code. That's the 15-foot wide buffer. In these areas, there'll be for every 100 feet, 5 trees, and then there's 2 rows of hedges that go through here. So in this area, as denoted in the asterisk, that's going to be met by the indigenous. So indigenous right away here, and at time of development order, they'll have to justify and show what that looks like once the exotics are removed. Does it meet that requirement for screening? The slide that I really want to hit home on is the residential. There, we've been mentioning this enhancement plus the code requirement. So when multifamily abuts single family, there is a type B as in boy buffer, which they're providing right here. That buffer is 15 feet wide, and it mimics the right-of-way buffer. So it's 15 feet wide, 5 trees every 100 linear feet, and the double hedge. The difference between the right-of-way and the type B buffer that we're talking about here is the size in the shrub. So the 36-inch high shrub is greater than what you get on a type D at 24 inches. So there's more screening involved. No wall here. When we work down to the enhancement that the applicant is providing, those are the red stars. This is what is the type C buffer in the land development code. It's whenever we have a parking area or drive aisle within 125 feet of single family, it triggers this buffer in the code. The applicant is providing this intense buffer, even though there's really there's parking that's adjacent to it, as well as the residential building. But in the Lehigh Acres code, they don't require our 125-foot rule to go in. So they require the 15-foot to go in here. So the applicant has enhanced this to become the 8-foot wall, setback 25 feet, with the vegetation between the property line and the wall. And that vegetation is 5 trees every 100 feet, and then the 18 shrubs every 100 feet. Where this blue star is, the indigenous is serving the buffer in this region to meet that type B buffer. So when staff was reviewing this, we looked at the compatibility with this residence, with the orientation of these buildings, as well as the lake excavation setback deviation and the parking, because we want to make sure that the headlight shine in here is screened when someone's coming home into this residential neighborhood, and the buffer will act that way. And the gentleman who wrote the letter in, he lives approximately in this area right here, and I have a better view of it on the aerial. And in his letter, he states that there's a 15-foot setback from his property to where the building is. And it would be, in this region, it would be 25 plus because of the way the buffer sits and the building sits. So we can kind of look at the aerial when I have a dot on that in the aerial. So he's going to have the 25-foot wide buffer with the 8-foot wall in that region. Surface water management. Mr. Fitzgerald went over this thoroughly with how it's designed. I just want to point out that the LEED plan has water quality requirements in there that talk about the filtering and using your green infrastructure. in this case, the applicant can't use these preserves to funnel water through them for the surface water management because they're upland preserves. So they have open swale systems or piped systems for movement of water to the lakes located here that then are controlled by the control structure and then filter out into the main water system. As Drew pointed out, there's existing pipes and existing drainage that's going to funnel the water this way and then out to Joel. The deviations, Mr. Fitzgerald went over thoroughly. There's a lot of the intersection separation and traffic deviations just because this infill project is abutting so many right-of-ways. And you have an existing developments that are in with multiple driveways that are non-conforming. So you have the separation from these driveways for the deviation 2, which you have 2 different reliefs in there. And then you have the separation from the Country Club Parkway to Joel in this region. And then we have a requirement that prohibits access onto Joel. County looked at that, and for compatibility and because of bonus density, we didn't want to approve anything coming out on these other right-of-ways because then it's funneling the project traffic through residents. And you have access onto an arterial road with the secondary coming onto a minor collector. So we approved that access coming on to Joel for that deviation.
And I think the existing, I'm double checking, I think the existing CPD had their access on Joel as well.
They also, and I can go back to that slide, but I'm pretty sure that it did have it going there, and the previous TIS showed the analyzation of that. The first deviation was just the excavation setbacks for the 25 feet in the areas where the deviation 1 is located. We tied it back to condition 9, which is that enhanced buffer, because those are the regions where they're asking for that 25-foot excavation setback. So with that, the county staff finds that the project is consistent with the Lee Plan and Land Development Code. There is protection measures to protect the surrounding land uses, including the residential, with the enhanced buffer and the way we've set up traffic going through the project, as well as the orientation of the buildings and the intensity being located more so towards Joel than to the south. And with that, staff finds that recommendation of approval.
Thank you. I asked the questions as I went through. Did the applicant have any questions of staff?
We don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go ahead and open public comment. Again, I'll call the cards in the order that I have them. So the first card that I have is for Marlene Demas. Good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Marlene Demas. This directly affects me because I'm right there. So I kind of want to make some clarifications with the buffer. So it will be your unit right there where Mr. Hamlin lives. I'm just trying to clarify that area.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that blue dot right there
Correct.
is his property.
Correct. So I'm looking specifically at that buffer and before the other buffers because that's the most enhanced buffer right there, right? So it'll be the housing unit, the trees, then the 8-foot wall. Is that correct? And your wall, do y'all know specifics yet, or no, it's just any kind of?
That usually is addressed, and just, I don't know if I said this before, if you ask questions, we're gonna take notes as we go through them. We don't usually answer them, but I'll.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure that's noted, because I mean, that's my concern, because I live right there as well. So that building is like, my pool's there with my kids, and then we have those 3-story units overlooking, and I'm scared things will thrown over. I don't know how. And then I do the lawn work, so I don't want to be having to worry about shrubbery. I intentionally don't have shrubbery on my yard because of my kids with the snakes and everything. So that is my concern, those items there. So it might look nice and sound appealing, but then other things happen. You know, is it going to get overgrown because people aren't cutting and then we have to trim? Or is it, you know, going to get nasty there with people throwing things because it seems like it's a renting thing? I don't know. So people, like, that's what's transformed our division now, is renters. They don't take care of it as you do your own house, and so it becomes trashy and yucky. So I am thankful that they are closing off the access right there on Kingston, because I walk the neighborhood. So I do thank you for taking care of the homeless, because as I walked, there was a lot of kids in the neighborhood and, you know, just safety concerns. So I do thank you for helping us with that. But my concern is, I'm glad you closed off that access, but the other access. So I walk the neighborhood. I also drive. I also have kids that drive. And you guys said that it's not going to disrupt traffic flow. I disagree. Not only is that traffic coming from Country Club, it's coming from the background. 2nd Street is, so there are 2 exits. They use both sides of Country Club. But because there's so much traffic coming from back there, they use our Country Club. So that second access that y'all just moved to, where you said it's not going to disrupt, I disagree, because we get backed up. I use that. I don't use that every day to go to work because it gets really busy, so I use 2nd Street trying to go against traffic. But my kids use it. We use it on the weekends. We're getting backed up. Within the past 3 years, that has changed. Traffic has drastically changed. I've been there for 20 years, and just all of a sudden, it's hard to get onto Joel Boulevard now, okay? I don't know if it's because we have the Family Dollar, the Discount Auto Parts, the 7-Eleven, all of that is booming there. And when you're saying 258 house units, which times 2 at least, the minimum, would be 516 people that might be driving, minimum, coming out. So it's already hard to come out onto Joel. So that is my concern, because I have 1 teenage driver and 2 other drivers apart from myself. That's scary when my kids are going out there trying to, so we have that a little condo unit that also has traffic, and because that middle condo is not a 55 and older anymore, they have overgrown a vehicle, so they're coming out. So I'm already having to worry about those, and then I'm gonna have to worry about that other. So that is my concern, is the traffic flow, besides how it's gonna affect my property. I know it's gonna move forward, and I know we're gonna try to figure out a barrier, but it's the traffic, the barrier, because we don't want that. And you did say, yes, there is a mixture. I knew that 20 years ago, there was that condominium, 55 and older. There was that 55 and older over their property as well. We knew what we were getting into, but it's not sandwiched within our houses. There's our houses. They told us there would be houses behind me. Okay, houses are gonna be built behind me. Not a 3-story looking up into me, affecting it. With 258 plus people there. All the noise, all the chatter. Our neighborhood is, for the most part, a very quiet neighborhood. My road, you hear Lehigh break-ins and everything. I feel safe. I walk at 8:30 at night. Even when the homeless was there, I was walking kind of there because I didn't have that worry. Now, when you get on the other side of the country club, I have that worry. But my street right there where you're developing around, I think that's like the nicest area in our country club, right? I mean, I might be biased, but that area is. And now that's going to be disturbed. The outer areas have been disturbed because that's where more of the rentals are, and you can tell where the rentals are. But a lot of those people own that house. And yes, a lot of them are not here, and I'm unfortunate, but I'm glad that Mark sent that letter in, because that greatly affects us, that building right there, on top of all the traffic. I think, the water pressure. So, I didn't think about that until it's hers, because we do have problems with water pressure already there.
Will you slow down so I can understand?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I know I'm not a time limit, but I'm like, water pressure. We do have problems at times with water pressure. I don't know the rhyme or the reason, and we don't usually put a complaint in because it's not all the time. It's usually in the evenings and when everybody's taking it home, showering. So I am a concern of how that added piping system will change the flow of the water pressure. I don't know if anybody else in the neighborhood, but I know I've talked to some of my neighbors, and there's just that's what we've gone to know. The water pressure does get lower at times. So that was one of my concerns, to make sure, because I know y'all said that it's not gonna affect it at all, but if it's already low and then you're tapping into it and there's more people, I'm thinking it's gonna get lower. Because we're on, we're on city water and septic, but our sprinklers are all on well. Are you guys going to have a well, or is your well gonna to whatever little grass and trees you have, are you gonna water it? Are you going to do it through where it cycles through your lakes? Are you going to tap into the well as well? So that's just something thought that came into mind because, thinking long term, I'm living there for a while. But I think my biggest is the traffic. That's my biggest concern, because that road is already within, like I said, the past 3 years the traffic has been crazy to get out. I mean, the line is lining up already on Country Club to go out onto Joel, and then you're having to hurry up because there's people coming from the church across the street, that little division there. So you don't see it. You have to kind of see it, especially the busy times of when everybody's leaving, and on the weekends. I mean, you said it was productive for the community. I don't see it as productive, other than it is, developing that front part so we don't have that yuckiness up front. I get that. But other than that, I don't see the sandwiching between the housing units right there around the Inglewood and Gardner Street area. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for coming today, ma'am. The next card I have is for Arthur St. Cyr. Is Arthur here? No? Okay. Keith Mangum.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry. I just had a question. With all the construction going on there, heavy machinery and stuff like that, I just wanted I have a pool. I live on the corner of Gardner and Kingston, and I just wanted to know who was going to be responsible if anything happens to the foundation of my home or my pool. That's basically what I'm looking at.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. The next card I have is for Derek Felder. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Derek Felder for the record. I am a member of the Lehigh ARB group where they did come to hold their meeting with us. I was just looking through our minutes from that meeting. Some of the mixed housing options in Lehigh is good. We're obviously mostly single family, and we don't have options for apartments and things like that. So that's somewhat welcomed. It would be nice to see some of it be affordable housing. And have that option also included somewhat possible. Traffic was mentioned as a concern. Obviously that'll be addressed during the DO phase. The turn lane, if in the DO phase there's a turn lane needed, I obviously understand that in the right of way you'll have going north on Joel, you'll add and have a right turn lane into your development. If a left turn lane going south on Joel was needed, right now it's just a 4-lane road. Would you have to reconfigure that entire 4-lane road to get that turn lane added? Obviously there's no details on that now, but just curious. Our meeting, one of our members says that the Lehigh Plan Code says we don't want walls. And I tried looking in the code just now to try to find if it specifically says no walls in Lehigh, and I couldn't necessarily find that. That's the way she made it sound, that we don't like walls apparently. I understand both sides of it, I guess. And then I was thinking about the other comment about not having the landscaping on the one side, and I understand the reasoning on her side of it of not having landscaping, and then I understand the other reasoning why people don't want to look at a wall. So the other side of it is they would probably want landscaping on the wall side. So if you can address is there landscaping on the wall side? Is there not landscaping? I don't know if not having a wall and just doing a thicker, more intense shrubs and trees without having the wall. I don't know. How many stories are the apartments? I believe you're allowed 45 feet. Is that 3 stories? And then my other comment with the height is, so if you were to go to the site plan and you got the 3 main buildings along the front area, I'll call it, along Joel, and then you got the other 2 buildings more closer to the residential. Like, could that one where it's sandwiched in the right between the residential, could that one only be 2 stories tall and the other ones be 3 stories? And then I comment on the site plan also, you show like the amenity center in the corner over on Country Club. And my comment on that was like, you know, should that amenity center be more like centralized so it's more in the middle of all the apartments? So like, you know, if you shifted those 2 over and then you had a amenity center in the middle more. And then I did look and I did see those drains and those swales and those catch basins between the first and second house on Englewood Avenue. So it looks like that all does drain out that direction. But I'm assuming you're not taking all your water from that site and pushing it down that swale between those homes. Like there's another drainage off Joel also, I would hope. So that's all I got really. So my big thing was, you know, could you make one of the buildings or 1 or 2 of the buildings only 2 stories tall instead of 3, and then maybe shifting the amenity center, and if you can do affordable housing in some of a percentage of it. Oh, if you go back to the other map regarding the traffic. So obviously traffic will be readdressed during the DO phase. Are you specifically, because like your property doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Country Club Parkway, where it wraps around on the north? I mean, you are on the south side, but are those intersections specifically being evaluated? Because if you do zoom out, where she was talking about 2nd Street connects into Country Club, that 2nd Street that's the only access for that entire Wheeler Road all the way in Hendry County. So like if you zoom out even more, you'll see that area of Hendry County where it's only accessible via that road basically. So anyone going from like that lives in this Wheeler Road area in Hendry County that's going to Fort Myers, they're all traveling down that 2nd Street and tying into that Country Club Parkway loop there. So just like if those 2 intersections where Country Parkway ties into Joel Boulevard, you know, when was the last time that those were evaluated by the county? Like that wouldn't necessarily be on them, that may be on the county to look at. That's all I got.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today. The next card I have is for Marlon, what does that say? Carter? Kastner. I needed my glasses for that one.
I'm going to pick, this is Marilyn Kastner. I'm president of Hillcrest Condominium. You can see it right there. I don't know how to do that thing, but as soon as it's right there off Archer Street on Parkway, off on Parkway. I want to also piggyback on Marlene's statement about the traffic. Our pool is right there by Joel, and inside the pool, if there's more than one person out there, you can't carry on a conversation. I mean, it's almost impossible. There is so much traffic. I hate to beat that dead horse, but and it's a constant. I have to say that. And as far as, like she said, with the 258 units and plus all these people leaving and exiting at the same time, I foresee, and I'm not a great predictor necessarily, but I foresee a need for a light or something at some time in the future, especially being Parkway the only way to enter and exit except for Joel, and that's going to be basically impossible, in my opinion. And I'm not sure if I heard right. Is it going to be a mix of market and affordable housing? I'm not sure if I heard that. If it's just market housing, I want to, in the interest of the community and generations to come to see or understand if that can be sort of grandfathered in the event that there's a sale of the area, just to kind of prevent. We did have an issue with the homeless, and I'm very grateful for their assistance in trying to, getting that cleared out. So that would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today. Next, I have Kathy Ford. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name's Kathy Ford, and I live on Flagler Avenue, which butts up along Kingston. I'm 5 houses down from Kingston. And I actually have several of the same concerns. It was addressed, the barrier along Kingston, but I wasn't really clear. I thought it was going to be the whole same thing, but I wasn't really clear what that barrier will be along Kingston, which I'm looking at as soon as I come out of my front door. So that's a big concern. I'd like clarification about that. Also, the traffic is horrendous at certain times of day, getting in and out of both entrances and exits on either side of these plots. I just feel like a traffic light is critical, because it's hard enough as it is. And the side exit along, where is that, Country Club, whatever, I feel like that will be backed up. Traffic, let's see. The low-income housing scares me, if that's a possibility. I don't want the value of my home to drop, being that close to it. I thought it was going to be market housing. But first I heard low income, then market, so I'm not clear, but I really am against the low income housing. I can't read my own writing here. I think that's about it. The barrier, the traffic, and the type of housing it will become. And also I had a question about when this would start, the construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming today. The next card I have is for Keith Mangum. Keith, I'm sorry, I've got some, and Derek again, these are all duplicates, I believe. And Mark Hamblin is not here, correct? That was the last meeting. Okay, thank you. Oh, that's why. Thank you. So these are duplicates from the first meeting. Okay, so that was every card that I had. Was there anyone else here that wished to speak? Okay, so we can, I'm sorry, yes?
Just add something from there. What Marilyn said as far as being grandfathered in, if it is sold so that it can't turn into low-income housing, if it...
That's not something, and just to clarify, again, I don't usually engage when we're doing public comment because then they're supposed to address it, but just to clarify for everybody, the type of ownership, so whether it's a condominium or if it's apartments, is not something that the county can regulate. So they might answer that question, but they don't have to through this process. And then any kind of encumbrance that they might put on the property long-term to say that it's going to be restricted one way or another is not something that the county can impose through the zoning process. So again, those are things that you're free to ask, and it might be more appropriate to ask them off the record, but they are not under any obligation to answer those questions today as part of this process. The code doesn't allow us to get into those specific issues. So when we go back to rebuttal, did you want to take some time before we begin?
Yeah, we have about 5-10 minutes.
Sure. And it's actually 2:15, let's say 2:30, so we'll come back at 2:30.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are back on the record and we can begin with the rebuttal whenever the applicant's ready.
For the record, Drew Fitzgerald. Just wanted to try to answer some of the questions that were that we heard during the public comment. So the buffer along Kingston, that's going to be a 36-inch high continuous double hedge row with 5 trees every 100 feet, so basically a tree every 20 feet, and then the shrubs themselves, they're maintained at 36 inches and it's continuous. And they're staggered, so it's just a continuous hedge. There will not be a wall along Kingston. But that'll give you a view of the landscaping with the lake. So. And no exit there. And no exit, just a lake. Then we've got, so the water pressure, I haven't looked at the water pressure situation out there, obviously, but the pipes out there are smaller than what would serve this apartment project. So when they go in for development order, there's going to have to be an extension of a much larger pipe. I think the code requires a minimum of 10 inches for multifamily. Right now, what I see in proximity to this property are like 6 inches. So I know it won't adversely impact them. It may actually help them if that's the cause of the low water pressure. With the 25-foot enhanced buffer, the code does require that the plantings to be on the outside of the wall, and that's considered a benefit to the adjacent property, so they're not staring at a wall, they're getting the landscaping. With apartments, they typically have maintenance companies, though. They don't rely on the individual residents there. They have maintenance companies that keep the grounds, and they want to keep the grounds nice so that they can get more renters. Otherwise people won't want to stay there. So I don't think there should be any concerns about maintenance of that buffer along the wall. Irrigation, we haven't looked at that. Typically on a development like this, you would probably use the lakes to draw from as an irrigation source. They may also include a well that would augment the lakes during the dry season, but the district has its own process of analyzing well permits, and they take into consideration other wells that are in the proximity to this and the depths of them. So that'll all be worked out in detail with the Water Management District in the future.
And I should have asked before, is there a pending DO yet for
No.
the property? Okay, so you will have to go back to the Lehigh Acres Planning
Yes.
Review Board before you do that, with
Correct.
that level of detail.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
For the record, Yuri Baika with TR Transportation Consultants. The one thing I want to emphasize is that our main access to this project is directly to Joe Boulevard. And the way the site is designed, as you can see, most of the buildings and most of the parking areas next to this main access driveway. So there won't be a significant amount of traffic using the side entrance. That's basically a secondary entrance. You might have some people from this residential building one that may possibly use it or not, but most people will be using this main entrance directly to Joe Boulevard to access to and from the site, not these side streets. Obviously remove this connection that was there before.
And you had to look at that, I believe that was one of the supplemental requests that the staff, do you recall what the breakdown was that you looked at in terms of usage of those two?
I mean, I would need a calculator to calculate it at this time,
But just roughly, if you can ballpark,
Roughly,
is it
yeah.
a quarter, is it half? I mean, how do you anticipate when you make those distributions?
So coming in from the east, obviously everybody will be using this entrance to enter the site. Not many people are going to be driving past the site to go around to get to here. So people from the east will be most likely using this.
And if you were coming from the west, you would have to make a turn and then another turn to get into it. So it just seems
Right.
intuitive, you would likely go in through the main entrance off of.
Right.
So that's, I assume, what you were evaluating when you did the calculations.
Yes, we look at the way the site plan is, and that's how we calculate where the traffic would be. So yeah, if I'm living in these buildings down here and here, I'll most likely just drive straight through and turn right here to get to my parking area and where I live. Otherwise, you have to make a right turn here, then make a turn here. That's just additional turns that you would want to avoid. Especially there's no signal here, so it's a free flow. So these people going east, they'll just drive through this intersection, probably use this driveway right here.
And
It's really easy.
That was one of the comments they had as well. Can you explain what the warrants are for signalization of an intersection? What is looked at for that, and when you would be looking at that?
Yeah, typically, well, that's an off-site intersection right here. That's an intersection of a arterial, which is maintained by Lee County, and a minor collector, which is also maintained by Lee County. So that's considered an off-site intersection. The way we mitigate that is just by paying road impact fees, which are used by Lee County to address concerns like this in the area.
And then the county is compiling that data to determine when it's necessary or warranted to
Right.
signalize any kind of intersection. So,
Right.
okay, but this project would be responsible for paying its proportionate, what's shared, not in that terminology, but essentially you'd be paying the road impact fees to offset whatever contributions you might be making?
Yes, yes, correct. And as we previously testified multiple times, the site is currently approved for a very, very large commercial development, over 160,000 square feet of commercial floor area, which would generate significantly more trips than what we're proposing on this site. So the site today has an existing CPD that they wouldn't have to go through this process and just develop a commercial retail center, which would generate a lot more traffic than what we're proposing with this multifamily project. So I just want to emphasize that again. And as well, this is not the only time we do a traffic study. As we go through a development order process with the county, we have to prepare another traffic study, which is much more detailed. It's based on exact number of units we're going to be developing. It looks like the need for turn lanes and intersection analysis if needed. And at that time, we'll evaluate exactly what on-site related improvements need to be done to support this project. So again, there's another traffic study that's done later on that's much more detailed. Thank you.
Terry Kramer again for the record. I want to address the market rate versus affordable housing questions and comments. This project is going to be based on market rate, not affordable housing. And I also wanted to address, I believe it's our Exhibit 1, the 48-hour letter. Are we going letters or numbers? I think you have it as Exhibit.
A was the 48-hour.
Okay, so Exhibit A. I just wanted to get in the record that we do obviously agree with the staff report, but we did have a proposed clarification or correction. On the page 4 of the staff report, it stated that the applicant proposes bonus density comprised of 64 units of site-built affordable housing and 65 units of Greater Pine Island TDU credits. What our request was on our page 2 is that the request includes bonus density with the purchase of TDUs or payment of affordable housing fees in lieu of the approximately 64 bonus units with Pine Island TDRs for the rest of the bonus density. So I just want to make that clear for the record, but the project is for market rate at this time. And that's I hope we address all the questions, and that's all we have for our rebuttal time. Thank you.
Did staff have any rebuttal you'd like to provide?
No, we agree with that. Staff agrees with that. There was a narrative that didn't decipher how that was working, so that's where we gathered that from.
I'm just going back through to be sure we addressed pertinent items. Okay, are we good? Okay. All right, so that will conclude the hearing for today. Again, the Land Development Code does require that applicants go back through the community plan review process whenever they have a development order. So I'm not sure how Lehigh Acres handles advertising or meeting locations of those meetings, but that would be another opportunity that you would have to look at the more detailed plans, because a lot of the questions that were asked are absolutely warranted, but they're not addressed at the zoning stage. They're addressed at the development order stage. So that's when you would get more detailed site plans and more detailed traffic information and things of that nature. So I believe there was one of the speakers is on that board. He might be able to provide you with that information, or it might be available online. But in any event, again, as I said at the beginning, I'll be making the recommendation to the board, and so if you spoke today, you will receive notice of that, and certainly welcome to come to the board hearing as well before they make the final decision on this matter. But thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you for putting your comments into the record, and please stay well and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.